The two clans started the war, and Marduk was left to die. Out of compassion, He decided for forgiveness, but condemned Marduk to isolation. The leaders divided the lands among them, and Inanna claimed her lands as Dumuzi's inheritance. And then, the king of Nibiru was called to earth. But not even the supreme god of Nibiru could foresee that the dispute between Inanna and Marduk would initiate an unprecedented battle. Who could have predicted the great calamity? Who could have predicted that the use of the weapons of terror would unleash the wind of death and destruction? In his celestial ship, Anu, the king of Nibiru, approached Earth, accompanied by his wife, Antu. On Earth, the descendants of Shem dwelt in the mountainous territories, and the black-headed people were migrating to their old land. Awaiting the arrival of the royalty of Nibiru, the Anunnaki on Earth were re-establishing their dwellings in Eden. At that time, the ground had just dried, and the Anunnaki resettled, providing food for everyone. In the grounds where Enki's first city, the ancient Eridu, once stood, a new Eridu emerged, marked on top of countless mud and sediment deposits. In the center, on an elevated platform, a new home for Enki and Damkina was erected. It was adorned with gold, silver, and precious metals that Enki's own children delivered. The monument was named the House of Tiles of the Lord, whose return is triumphant. Above, in a circle pointing to the sky, the 12 constellations were marked by their signs. Below, as in the Abzu, waters with swimming fish flowed. And then, far from the reach of others, in a sanctuary that no guest could enter, Enki guarded the ME formulas. That was the first ziggurat that rose. And it was no different for Enki's brother, Enlil. Thus, another ziggurat was erected. That was the next Nibru key, built especially for Enlil and Ninlil. On top of clay and mud, the building rose. It was a sacred enclosure erected among the dwellings and cattle pens. It was a ladder to heaven, built in 7 stages. A staircase that rose to the highest plateau. Inside, Enlil kept the tablets of destinies. Thus rose the lifted eye that scanned the lands, observing everything. In the courtyard, in its own enclosure, Enlil's fast-stepping skybird remained. Days passed and the arrival of Anu and Antu was approaching. It was decided to build a celestial dwelling to wait for the king, which was neither near Enlil nor Enki. That was ANUNNAKI, the delightful place. Large trees were planted to cast shade over the royalty of Nibiru. A pure white structure rose. It was the House of Anu, built in the middle of the garden. When Anu's celestial ship arrived on Earth, the Anunnaki's small spacecrafts flew towards it, and so they guided the celestial ship to a safe landing at the place of the chariots in Tilman, in the land of missiles. Utu, the commander, welcomed his great-grandparents who were arriving on planet Earth. Thus, the 3 sons of Anu, the Anunnaki Enlil, Enki, and Ninma, were there to greet them. They embraced and kissed, laughed and cried. The time they had been apart was so long, and their appearances were so different. Although the parents were older in Shars, they looked younger than their children. The 2 sons looked older and bearded. Ninma, once full of beauty, was now bent and wrinkled. All were filled with tears, They were tears of joy and sadness mixed together. Thus, the royalty of Nibiru was received on earth. From the skies, celestial ships full of guests arrived in Eden, to a place prepared next to ANUNNAKI, where the ships were landing. All the Anunnaki who had stayed on earth were standing in a guard of honor position. They waved welcome in unison to Anu and Antu. Then, in a procession, singing and playing music, the Anunnaki accompanied the guests to the house of Anu. In the house of Anu, the king washed and rested. Antu went to the golden bed house, accompanied by other Anunnaki, and there she also washed and rested. Next, the king and queen returned to the public space, in the open courtyard. Like an evening breeze, the leaves of the trees whispered as Anu and Antu sat on their thrones. Enlil, Enki, and Ninma were beside them. The celebration had begun. Earthly servants served wine, and in another corner a bull and a ram were being roasted. These were gifts from Enlil and Enki to the royalty of Nibiru, now on earth. A great banquet was prepared for Anu and Antu, waiting for the sign in the skies to begin. Under the instructions of Enlil, Zumul, who was knowledgeable about stars and planets, climbed the steps of the house of Anu to announce the rise of the planets at dusk. On the first step, Kishar appeared in the eastern skies. Lahamu, or the second step, was seen. Mumu was announced on the third step. Anshar emerged on the fourth step. Lamu was seen on the fifth step. The moon was announced on the sixth step. Then, under the signal of Zumul, the hymn was recited. It was called "The Planet of Anu in the Skies Rises" began to be sung, for from the highest step, the seventh, Nibiru with a red halo came into view. To the sound of music, the Anunnaki clapped and danced. They danced and sang. The songs were for the brightly shining planet. The songs were directed to the celestial planet of Lord Anu. And with a signal, a bonfire was lit. Thus, each of the bonfires everywhere were ignited. Before the night was over, all of Eden was lit by bonfires. After a meal of bull and ram meat, fish and bird, accompanied by wine and beer, Anu and Antu went to their rooms, and all the Anunnaki were thankful for them. For several days and nights on earth, Anu and Antu slept. It was only on the sixth day that he called his two sons and his daughter. He listened to reports of what had occurred on earth, of peace and war. Anu heard that the inhabitants of earth, who should have been eliminated by Enlil's oath, had proliferated again. Enlil also revealed to him the discovery of gold in the land beyond the oceans, and the location of the new chariot's place. It was then that Enki told his father about the dream and the tablet that Galzu had given to him. Anu was confused. A secret emissary by his name. He had never sent anyone to Earth in his name. The three leaders were confused, not knowing who had sent Galzu. Enki said, "Because of Galzu, Zusudra and the Seed of Life were saved." Enlil said, "We stayed on Earth because of Galzu. He warned us we would die the day we returned to Nibiru." Anu could not believe it. Enki and Enlil said in unison, "If it wasn't you, then who sent Galzu?" Ninma nodded her head and then spoke. "Galzu came in the name of the Creator of all," she declared. Then she continued, "Was the creation of Earth's inhabitants also predestined?" For a while, the four remained silent, reflecting on past events in their hearts. Anu said, "Though we have decreed fates, the hand of destiny guides every step. The will of the Creator of all is clearly perceived through his message. We are nothing more than emissaries here. The earth belongs to the earthlings, and to preserve and advance them is our destiny." Enki said, "If that's our mission here, let's act accordingly." Thus, the great Anunnaki, who decree the fates, exchanged counsel about the lands. Aware of the importance of promoting civilized development, they made the most important decision: to share their knowledge with humanity. Thus, they planned the construction of cities and the creation of sacred dwellings to house the Anunnaki themselves. On Earth, they wanted to establish a reign similar to that of Nibiru, where they would choose a man to receive the crown and scepter. Through him, the word of the Anunnaki would be conveyed to the people, enhancing their abilities and expanding their labor. To ensure continued devotion to the Anunnaki, they would establish sacred shrines and institute priesthood. These priests would serve and worship the Anunnaki as divine and superior beings. Moreover, they would receive teachings of secret knowledge, the purpose of which was to convey civility to humanity, thus building a civilization. In this great plan, the Anunnaki manifested their ancient wisdom, recognizing human potential for prosperity and progress. Their intentions were clear. They would guide humanity towards a grand future, sharing secrets and guidance that would allow them to tread the path of development and flourishing. Thus, they decided to create 4 regions. 3 of them were for humanity, and 1 was restricted and reserved to the Anunnaki themselves. Thus, they established the first region in the ancient land of Eden. This region was reserved for Enlil and his sons. Then they established the second region in the land of the 2 Narrows. These lands were for the domains of Enki and his sons. Thus, they designated the third region. It was the lands of Inanna, in a distant land not to mix with the other 2. And then they determined the 4th region, consecrated only to the Anunnaki. That was the peninsula of the place of the chariots. After the decision about the 4 regions and the fate of civilized humanity, Anu questioned about his grandson Marduk. He confided that he would like to see him again. Anu recalled that by his decision, Dumuzi and Ningishida were led to Nibiru, and he wondered if Marduk's anger was caused by him. Thus, Anu wished to reconsider Marduk's punishment. Enlil replied, "When you travel to the lands beyond the oceans, we will inform Marduk that you will meet him. Marduk is wandering these lands." Anu agreed, but before they could travel to the lands beyond the oceans, Anu and Antu visited Eden, and then they passed through Eridu and also through Nibruki. Thus they could see the cities being planned and built. However, Enlil complained to Anu that Enki was keeping the ME formulas to himself, and from the king's throne, Anu praised Enki. Anu said, "My son has built himself a magnificent house, raised on a platform. The people who surround and serve him will be provided with great knowledge. So now the knowledge that is secret in the ME formulas must be shared with other Anunnaki." Enki was embarrassed by what he did and promised to share Anu's divine formulas with everyone. In the following days, traveling in ships, Anu and Antu visited other regions. And it was on the 17th day that the royal couple returned to ANUNNAKI for another night of rest. The next day, the young ANUNNAKI stood before Anu and Antu seeking their blessings. In this time, Anu observed Inanna. He embraced and kissed her. Then he said, "Listen to my words," he announced to those present. "This place, after we depart, will be given as dowry to Inanna, and the spacecraft in which we will explore Earth will be a gift for her." Joyful, Inanna began to dance and sing. Her praises to Anu were sung as hymns. After saying goodbye to the Anunnaki, Anu and Antu departed for the lands beyond the oceans. Enlil and Enki, Ninurta, and Ishkur went with them to the Golden Land. To impress King Anu with the great wealth of gold, Ninurta built a dwelling for Anu and Antu. The stones were cut to perfection and covered with pure gold. A golden fence, carved with flowers of carnelian stones, awaited the royal couple. The dwelling was built on the edge of the great mountain lake, and thus Anu and Antu observed the collection of nuggets of gold. Satisfied, Anu said, "There's enough gold here, and for many shars yet to come." Then Ninurta showed Anu and Antu an artificial mound. He explained how a place for melting and refining metals was constructed. He showed how he extracted metal from stones and explained that the mound was made to melt and refine metals. The place built by the Anunnaki was called Anak, as well as the Great Lake, which was named Lake Anak. Thus, Anu and Antu started the journey, sailing across the lake. From a distance, they could see the great horned animals in the northern lands. Marduk then appeared, standing before his father Enki and his grandfather Anu. Nabu, Marduk's son, also accompanied him. Then Enki asked, "Where is Sarpanit?" But Marduk shook his head, sadly recounting her death. Marduk said, "Now only Nabu is with me." Anu pressed Marduk to his chest, saying, "You have been punished enough." Thus Anu approached and blessed Marduk, placing his right hand on his head. And so Marduk was forgiven. Then from the golden place high in the mountains to the plain below, all gathered. The celestial ship of Anu and Antu was there, at the new place of celestial chariots, which Ninurta had prepared. The celestial ship was laden with gold up to its edges. The time to depart had come. In farewell, Anu offered important guidance. Let destiny answer for itself. And if it's the destiny of Earthlings to inherit the Earth, then let's leave Earth for the Earthlings. Offer knowledge to humanity. Teach Earthlings the laws of justice and righteousness. Teach, within a limit, the secrets that involve heaven and earth. Then Anu embraced and kissed everyone. Thus, the celestial ship, adorned with gold on all its edges, rose from the earth to the heavens. In commemoration of Anu's visit, the Anunnaki decided to start another count of time. This count referred to the years of the earth, not to the shars of Nibiru. The count began in the age of the bull, an era dedicated to Enlil. Marduk was the first to break the silence, and his words were filled with anger. What is this new place of celestial chariots? What happened during my exile and without my knowledge? Marduk demanded answers. Enki approached and told Marduk about the choices of the 4 regions. At this moment, Marduk's rage knew no bounds. He questioned, "Why Inanna? She caused Dumuzi's death, and then she received her own region." Enlil said, "The decisions were made and they will not be changed." Thus, each within their spaceships, the Anunnaki returned to Eden and its neighboring lands. Enlil, sensing the upcoming problems, instructed Ishkur to stay behind and keep watch over the gold. When the Anunnaki leaders arrived at Eden, the place of the first civilized region, they taught the Earthlings how to make clay bricks to build cities. Where only the Anunnaki cities once stood, now cities for them and Earthlings alike sprouted. They created and consecrated grand sacred places for the Anunnaki, who stayed in their elevated dwellings. The Earthlings started calling these places temples. Served and worshipped as high lords and gods, the Anunnaki were deities, honored and adored by the Earthlings. Anu's orders were being followed, and the legacy for humanity was unfolding. The great Anunnaki were known by their numbers. Anu the Celestial was assigned the number 60. Enlil was given the number 50. Ninurta, Enlil's eldest son, was given the same number, 50. Lord Enki took position 40. Nannar, son of Enlil and Ninlil, received position 30. For his son and successor, Utu was given the position 20. The other sons of the Anunnaki leaders received numeric ranks of 10. Ranks of 5 were shared among the Anunnaki females and their spouses. Thus, the construction proceeded. The cities were built and the coexistence between humans and Anunnaki increased. The temples grew, and so did the cities. After the construction of the temples of Eridu and Nibruki, the district of Girsu in Lagash was made, and the command was given to Ninurta. The place was named Eninu, House of 50, and that was the temple of Ninurta and his wife Bau. The great black skybird was there, protected by the Supreme Hunter and the Supreme Smiter, the weapons left by Anu. Thus, Eninu was properly protected. In the new Sipar, on top of the post-flood mud soil, a celestial dwelling was built for Utu and his wife Aya. That was Ibabar, the Shining House, and from there, Utu promulgated laws of justice for humanity. In other places, where the mud did not yield, the old plans could not follow, and so new places were chosen. Near Shurubak, Adab was built, and in it, the temple known as the House of Succor and Healing Knowledge was constructed. That was the dwelling of Ninma, and Ninma archived in that sanctuary the ME containing the information of the Earthlings' creation. For Nannar, a city was created with straight streets, docks, and channels. The city was called Urim, and later would be known as Ur. And within Ur, the temple was called House of the Throne Seed, where moonbeams reflected on the lands. Ishkur returned to the mountainous lands of the north, where another temple was built. That was the House of Seven Storms. Inanna received the legacy left by Anu. That was Unug-Ki that later would be known as Uruk. In Eridu remained Marduk and Nabu, in the city of Enki, in Eden. Neither of them had their own city or their own temple. In the first region, in the lands of Eden and the cities with districts, the Anunnaki began to teach skills and crafts to the Earthlings. Thus, fields were irrigated, and vessels were built to cross the rivers. Sheep enclosures and barns overflowed, and prosperity filled the land. The first region was named Sumer, and became known as the Land of the Lofty Watchers. Then the Anunnaki decided that the Earthlings, known as the Black-Headed People, should have a city of their own. The city was named Kishi, the City of Scepter. and as it was the royalty on Nibiru, so began the humanity's royalty in Kishi. There, on the consecrated ground, where Anu and Enlil implanted the heavenly bright object, Ninurta traveled to Eridu and conversed with Enki. He asked for the Emmi of royalty, so it would be possible to start the Earthlings' royalty. Enki granted 50 Emmi to Ninurta, so Ninurta appointed the first king, and the title given to him was Mighty Man. In Kishi, the black-headed people learned mathematics and numbers, writing, and how to make beer. Oven and blacksmithing work began under the care of Ninurta. They created wheeled carts, and laws of justice were taught to the Earthlings. Songs and praises were sung to Ninurta. The praises were for him and his deeds, as well as for the blackbird. It was a glorious time for Ninurta, who was honored with the constellation of the Archer. Meanwhile, in Uruk, Inanna planned the facilities of her domains. She awaited the beginning of the third region, but the other Anunnaki said the third region would be established after the second region was completed. But Inanna was not satisfied. She noticed that Ninurta had traveled to Eridu and obtained the Emmi of royalty there. Thus, she hatched a plan. Inanna sent her maid Ninshubur to Eridu, and through her announced her own visit. Enki ordered his vizier Izimud to prepare for Inanna's visit. Sweet wine, beer jugs, and barley cakes with butter were prepared. Inanna entered Enki's dwelling alone and was led by Izimud to the inner chambers. Inanna was stunning, adorned with jewels and a thin dress that revealed her body. Elegantly, Inanna moved, letting the robe reveal her perfect and outlined curves. Enki was completely lost before such beauty. Thus, they drank 2 chalices of sweet wine, and they began a competition to drink the beer. Inanna laughed and pleaded with Enki, "Let me hold the Emmi in my hand." Enki, completely taken by her beauty, gave the Emmi 7 times to Inanna. These were the divine formulas for lordship and royalty, for priesthood and writing, for dressing with love and for warfare, for music and song, carpentry, precious metals and gemstones. One by one, during the game, Enki handed over the Emmi to Inanna. Thus, he handed over the necessary 94 Emmi for the establishment of a civilized kingdom. Enki, entranced by Inanna's beauty and the drinks they shared, fell asleep, while Inanna held the 94 Emmi in her hands. Holding them, she boarded her ship and left for her lands in the third region. When Enki woke up from his deep sleep, he ordered his vizier Izimud, "Catch Inanna and bring back all the Emmi you must chase Inanna's ship." So Izimud set off in search of Inanna and managed to intercept her ship near Uruk. Izimud told Inanna that she should return to Eridu and face Enki's wrath. And so Inanna did. But when she returned to Eridu, the Emmi were no longer with her. Inanna had given the Emmi to her handmaid, Ninshubur, and had ordered that the Emmi be taken into Anu's house in Uruk, which was now Inanna's dwelling. Enki spoke forcefully. "In the name of my power, in the name of my father, Anu, I order that the Emmi be returned, and until they are returned, you will be held captive in my dwelling." Enlil heard Enki's words, and immediately traveled to Eridu to resolve the situation. Thus Enki, Enlil, and Inanna convened. Inanna said, "I have the right to the Emmi. It was Enki who put them in my hands." Enlil asked, "Is this true?" Enki confessed in a low voice, saying, "Yes." Enlil decreed, "Then when the time of Kishi's royalty is complete, royalty will pass to Uruk, in Inanna's lands." Thus, the situation was resolved, and time would reveal the royalty in Uruk. However, the news reached Marduk, who was immensely enraged, and his anger knew no bounds. Marduk said, "I have suffered enough humiliation." And yelling, Marduk said, "I demand my own city in Eden. I demand that Enlil designate a city for me." But Enlil did not heed Marduk's appeal. And then Marduk took destiny into his own hands. He chose a region that had previously been considered to receive Anu's arrival. And thus, his son Nabu gathered the Igigi from all the scattered lands to found a sacred city for Marduk, and a place for the celestial ships. However, problems began quickly. When Marduk's followers arrived at the location, they found no stones for construction, and Marduk showed how to make bricks and bake them in the fire, so they could serve as stone. Thus, they began to build a tower, whose top could reach the heavens. Enlil noticed the plan and quickly rushed to the site, trying to placate Marduk with soft words. But Enlil, who had not heeded Marduk's request for the grant of his city, could not stop Marduk and Nabu in their venture. Immediately, in Nibruki, Enlil gathered his sons and grandsons, and together they considered what they could do. Enlil said, "Marduk is building an unauthorized gateway to heaven, a passage up to the heavens, entrusting this tower to the earthlings." Ninurta said, "If we allow this to happen, no other matter of humanity will remain untouched. This evil plan must be stopped now." All agreed with Ninurta's words, so they hatched a plan. Thus, in the darkness of the night, the Enlilites approached and rained down fire and brimstone, wreaking havoc on the under-construction tower, and thus they destroyed the entire camp. Enlil decided and proclaimed, "From now on, I will shatter the unity of the Earthlings and confuse their ideas." The Earthlings, until now, had a common language, and they understood each other. From this point forward, I will confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. That was the 310th year since the beginning of the Earth years count. Then, in every region and every land, people began to speak a different language. A different form of writing was then given to each one, so one could not comprehend what the other wrote. And so in this way, 23 kings ruled in Kishi, which was the city of the scepter, for 408 years. Also in Kishi, a beloved king, Etana, was taken to the heavens for a celestial journey. And as determined by Enlil in the appointed time, the reign was transferred to Uruk. The bright celestial object of Kishi was transferred to the domains of Inanna in the first region. And hymns of exaltation were sung for Inanna, the radiant lady, dressed in splendor, loved in heaven and on earth, consecrated by the love of Anu. Great praises were proclaimed for Inanna. 7 times Inanna held the Emi in her hands. They are appropriate for the crown of rain and suitable for high priesthood. Hail to the lady of the great Emi, of sacred formulas. She, Inanna, is the guardian. That was the 409th year since the beginning of the Earth years count. And in first region, the reign was directly transferred to Uruk. And for its first reign, a high priest of Eanna temple abode was appointed. Meanwhile, Marduk moved to the land of the Two Narrows. That was the second region, and Marduk hoped that he could be the lord of those lands as soon as the second region was established. When he arrived in the land of the Two Narrows, he was received by Ningishida, who explained what was happening in those lands. Ningishida told him that he was overseeing the lands with the help of the descendants of the Anunnaki, who had settled there and married earth women. Marduk quickly realized that his decrees had been extinguished and asked what had happened. Marduk demanded an answer. He accused Ningishida of destroying the hidden and the occult, and blamed him for what happened to Horus, who was forced to depart to a barren and waterless place, far from everything and everyone. The two brothers caused an uproar, sparking a bitter dispute. Marduk said, "You were my usurper, and from now on, you will only be my assistant. If you are inclined to rebellion, you should leave for another land." Thus, for 350 years, Marduk and Ningishida argued in the land of the two Narrows. During this time, the land was plunged into chaos. That's when Enki instructed Ningishida to depart for other lands. Enki said, "In the name of peace, you should leave for other lands." And so, Ningishida moved to the land beyond the oceans with a group of followers. At that time, in the count of the Earth's year, 650 years had elapsed. As soon as Ningishida moved to the new domains, he was given the name of the Winged Serpent. He became known as Quetzalcoatl, and in the new lands, a new count of time he began. And then, in the land of the two Narrows, the second region was established over the domains of Marduk. In the annals of the first region, it was called Megan, land of the cascading river, also known as the ancient Egypt. But by the people of the second region, when languages were confused, that was Hemta, the dark brown land. The Anunnaki were now called Neteru, the guardian watchers. Thus Marduk was worshipped as the Bright One and began to be called Ra. Enki, the developer, began to be revered as Ptah. And Ningishida was remembered as Tehuti, or Thoth, the divine measurer. Thinking of erasing the memory of his brother Ningishida, Thoth, Marduk, Ra, decided to modify the image of the Sphinx with a new image that could remind his son Osiris. Besides this, Ra changed the count, which was previously in 60s to 10s. And he divided the year into 12 parts. Ra shifted the observation of the moon to the observation of the sun and united the cities that Thoth had divided. The city of the north and the south were now one city of the crown. Where the two lands meet and the great river divides, Ra founded a city of the scepter. Thus, Ra appointed a king, a descendant of the Anunnaki. That was Mina, the king whose reign began in the first dynasty of Egyptian pharaohs. And he began to call the city as Mena Nefer, or Memphis, meaning the beauty of Mena. He made the city shine so brilliantly that it surpassed Kishi in the first region. And to honor his elders, Ra built a holy city. And in honor of the king of Nibiru, he named the city Anu. And then, on a platform, he erected a temple shelter for his father Enki, Ptah. At the apex, within a high tower pointing to the heavens, in his sanctuary, Ra deposited the upper part of his celestial ship. That was called Ben-Ben. It was in that ship that he had traveled from the planet of countless years. On New Year's Day, the king as the high priest performed the ceremonies. On that day only, he entered the room of stars, and before the Ben-Ben he placed offerings. Enki, Ptah was elated and to benefit the second region offered all kinds of emei to Ra. Father and son drew near. Enki, Ptah, asked Marduk Ra, his son, "What do I know that you do not?" Thus all sorts of knowledge he offered to Marduk, Ra, his son, except for the knowledge to revive the dead. Enki, Ptah, offered Marduk, Ra, the constellation of the sign of Ram, Aries, and thus made him one of the 12 celestials. Ptah regulated the flow of water from the great river Hapi for Ra and his people. Abundance quickly arrived in the fertile soils, and men and cattle proliferated. With the success of the second region, leaders were encouraged to establish the third region. They decreed it would become a domain of Inanna, as was promised. Then, a celestial constellation was assigned to her. She was made one of the 12 great Anunnaki and the great celestial gods. Previously, she shared the Gemini station with her brother Utu, but from that moment on, as a gift from Ninmah, the constellation of the Maiden was assigned to Inanna. That was the year 860 according to Earth counting, and thus Inanna was honored again. The third region was far away, in the eastern lands, beyond 7 chains of mountains. Inanna's realm in the highlands was called Zamash, the land of 60 precious stones. There was also Arata, the kingdom of the forests in a valley of a great winding river. There, people grew grains and raised cattle on the vast plains. There, they also built 2 cities with mud bricks that were filled with granaries. According to the decree of Enlil, Lord Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, created a modified language and new writing signs for the third region. In his wisdom, Enki created a language unknown to men. However, the ME of the civilized realms were not offered to the third region. Enki said, "Let Inanna share what she obtained for Uruk with the new region." Then Inanna appointed a shepherd chief, who bore many resemblances to her beloved Dumuzi. Inanna traveled in her spaceship, constantly moving from Uruk to Arata, and from Arata to Uruk, flying over mountains and valleys. She valued the precious stones of Zamash and carried pure lapis lazuli with her to Uruk. At that time, the king of Uruk was Enmerkar, the second to reign there. Enmerkar expanded the boundaries of Uruk, and Inanna was exalted for her glories. It was he who coveted the riches of Arata and planned to be the sovereign over the lands of Arata. Thus, Enmerkar sent an emissary to Arata demanding the riches of those lands as tributes. Over 7 chains of mountains, through arid lands and then drenched by rains, the emissary traveled from Uruk to Arata. In front of the king of Arata, the emissary delivered Enmerkar's words. Literally, he repeated word by word, but the king of Arata could not understand his language. Then the king of Arata offered him a wooden scepter on which a message was inscribed, asking to share with Arata their ME and thinking of peace. A royal gift was delivered to Uruk. Thus, several donkeys were loaded with grains and delivered to the emissary. But when Enmerkar received the wooden scepter with the inscription, "Back in Uruk," no one understood its message. He brought it from light to shadow. He brought it from shadow to light. "What kind of wood is this?" he asked. Then he ordered to plant it in the garden. 5 years passed, 10 years passed, and from the scepter a tree grew. Enmerkar turned to his grandfather Utu. "What should I do?" Utu interceded on behalf of Enmerkar and conversed with Nisaba, and Nisaba taught Enmerkar to inscribe his message on a clay tablet in the language of Arata. And the message was carried from Uruk to Arata. The emissary's name was Banda, and Banda was received by the king of Aratta, delivering the message that said, "Submission or war." In the face of the message, the king of Aratta said, "Inanna has not forsaken our kingdom, so Aratta will not submit to Uruk. If Uruk's desire is war, then let the warriors meet, and let the war begin." But then the king of Aratta thought better and said, "Let's exchange our treasures peacefully. Let Uruk offer us their emi, and in exchange, Aratta will offer our riches." Banda, the emissary, took the way back, carrying a different message. Neither submission nor war. The message was of peace. But on the way back, the emissary fell to the ground, terribly sick, and his spirit left his body. His companions tried to revive him, but it was in vain. On Mount Hurum, on the way to Aratta, Banda was abandoned, and there his body lay. Uruk did not receive the riches of Aratta, and Aratta did not obtain the emi of Uruk. In the third region, civilized humanity did not find peace. Meanwhile, Inanna coveted other domains, forgetting those that had been entrusted to her. Even though she had Anu's royal dwelling in Uruk and the lands of the third region, it was still not enough for her. Inanna was restless, and she constantly traveled between Uruk and Aratta. She was still mourning the death of her beloved Dumuzi, and her desire for love remained insatiable. When she flew around, she saw the image of Dumuzi shining in the sun's rays and calling for her. At night, in visions and dreams, he appeared saying, "I will return." And then Dumuzi promised her the glories of a realm in the land of the Two Narrows. While she was pleasing the omens of her dreams, Inanna built a house in Uruk called Gigunu. That was a house for nighttime pleasure. Young heroes went to Gigunu on the night of their weddings. They were seduced with sweet words and caresses. Inanna promised them a happy future, and while she was with them, she imagined Dumuzi. And the next morning, the young heroes were found dead in her bed of pleasure. It was at that moment that the hero Banda, previously left for dead, returned alive to Uruk. Inanna screamed, "This is a miracle, a miracle." It was by the grace of Utu that the miracle happened, and Banda was a descendant of Utu. But Inanna understood that the power of the miracle had been granted to her and to the region of Uruk. So, Inanna said, "My beloved Dumuzi has returned to me." And she planned a test. Meanwhile, Banda bathed at his house and was covered with a sash and a mantle. Inanna called for Dumuzi, her beloved. And to her bed, adorned with flowers, she called for the miracle. Thus, Banda was drawn in by Inanna's charms. And when the night was over, in the morning, Banda was alive. And with joy, Inanna cried even more, "The power of not dying has been put into my hands. Immortality has been granted to me." Then, Inanna gave herself the title of goddess. Nanar and Ningal, the parents of Inanna, were not satisfied with her proclamation. Enlil and Ninurta were disconcerted by her words. Utu, her brother, was confused. Enki and Nima talked. They said, "The dead reviving? This is not possible." In the lands of Sumer, people praised their luck. The earthlings said, "The gods are among us. They can defeat death and can grant eternal life. and news about this was widely spread. In Uruk, on the throne, Lugal took the place of his father Enmerkar. His title was the Great Man. Lugal took the goddess Ninsun, descendant of Enlil, as his wife. The goddess Ninsun and Lugal had a son. That was Gilgamesh, the son of a goddess descendant of Enlil. And Gilgamesh took the throne of Uruk. As the years went by, Gilgamesh observed life and death. He asked his mother, Ninsun, about life and death. He asked why his ancestors died if they were descendants of the Anunnaki. Gilgamesh asked, "Do the gods die? And what about me being 2/3 divine? Will I die like a mortal?" Ninsun replied, "As long as you are on earth, you will follow the destiny of all earthlings. The shadow of death will take you, but if you are taken to Nibiru, there you will obtain a long life." Ninsun asked Utu, the commander, to take Gilgamesh to Nibiru. And while she received no answer, Ninsun kept making the same request day after day. Finally, Utu accepted and said that Gilgamesh should be directed to the landing place. Ninmah created a double for Gilgamesh. His name was Enkidu, and he was created by Enki. He was not born of a womb and had no blood in his veins. Enkidu traveled with Gilgamesh to the landing place, and they met a guardian of the place. A monster that spat fire blocked the entrance. But it didn't take long until the heroes managed to defeat the monster and broke him into pieces. And then they looked for the secret entrance that offered access to the landing place. When they found the secret entrance to the Anunnaki tunnels, they were challenged by another guardian. It was the Bull of Heaven, a creature of Enlil. Fleeing, the creature chased Gilgamesh and Enkidu to the gates of the entrance of Uruk. And before the city walls, Enkidu defeated the monster. When Enlil heard the news, he cried in agony, and his lament was heard up to the heavens of Anu. In his heart, Enlil knew very well this was a bad omen. For having killed the Bull of Heaven, Enkidu was punished with death in the waters, and Gilgamesh was absolved, as he had received instruction from Ninsun and Utu. Still seeking the long life of Nibiru, Utu allowed Gilgamesh to continue towards the place of spaceships. And thus, after many challenges, Gilgamesh found the land of Tilman, the secret and forbidden region of the Anunnaki, the fourth region. There, through the underground tunnels, he found a garden of precious stones and met Zeusudra. Zeusudra shared with Gilgamesh the events of the deluge and revealed to him the secret of longevity. Zeusudra spoke of a plant that grew in the well of the garden, a plant that had kept him and his wife from aging. This plant was unlike any other on earth and could restore a man to his full vitality and strength. Zeusudra told Gilgamesh that this gift came from Enki, offered with the blessings of Enlil, granted to him on the Mount of Salvation. Driven by the desire for longevity, Gilgamesh took advantage of Zeusudra's and his wife's slumber, tied stones to his feet, and dived into the waters. He seized the plant of long life and pulled the youth plant from the depths. He stored the plant in his pouch and rushed through the secret tunnels, finding his way back to Uruk. Exhausted from his journey, Gilgamesh fell asleep. As soon as sleep took him, a snake was attracted by the fragrance of the plant. While Gilgamesh slept, he did not notice that the snake stole his plant and vanished with it. Upon waking the next morning, Gilgamesh realized he no longer had the plant and realized he could not achieve longevity. He sat and wept. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk empty-handed, and there met his fate as a mortal. 7 kings reigned in Uruk after Gilgamesh, That was the land of ANUNNAKI, later known as Uruk, and it would become called Erech in the Bible. This was the region of heroes and demigods. That was the year 1000 in Earth account. That's when the royalty of the first region was transferred to Ur, the city of Nannar and Ningal. Marduk, a Ra, in the land of the two Narrows, in the second region, observed all movements attentively. He saw all the matters occurring in the other regions. He observed the comments on the visions and dreams of Inanna, who insinuated herself over the entire domain of Dumuzi, speaking about his return. Inanna was not content with what she had. She planned more and awaited Dumuzi's return to have her powerful and dreamed reign. Thus, Marduk, Ra, was disturbed and felt that something needed to be done. To counter Inanna's expansion plans, Marduk was determined to find answers about death, resurrection, and immortality. The ideas of a deity who could grant life were extremely attractive to him. So Ra declared himself a powerful god. He considered that the secret had been told to Gilgamesh and other demigods of the Uruk region who sought the deeds and the path of immortality. Marduk, Ra, said, "If it was granted to others, let it be applied to the kings of my region too. Let the kings of the second region, in Egypt and Nubia, receive the instructions. Let the descendants of Neteru travel to Nibiru in the other life, on their journey beyond life, in the afterlife." Thus, Ra taught the kings how to build tombs facing east, and he dictated a long book to the priest scribes. In it were described the details for the journey in the other life, to the beyond of life, detailing the post-death journey. The book told of how to reach Duat, the place of celestial ships. Duat was the Egyptian name for the fourth region, on the Sinai Peninsula. And then Marduk, Ra, taught how to build tombs facing east. He taught how to ascend through a stairway to heaven and journey to the imperishable planet. He noted that one should drink from the plant of life the waters of youth, until satiety comes. He clarified the coming of the gods to earth. Ra explained to the priests the knowledge of the gods, and he told them that gold is the splendor of life. He said, "Gold is the flesh of the gods." Then Ra demonstrated how to obtain gold and said that there should be expeditions to Abzu and the lower domain to obtain the gold. Then, with the force of arms, the kings and commanders of Ra conquered lands that were not their own. Marduk, Ra, invaded the lands of his brothers, and they complained to Enki, Marduk's father, known in ancient Egypt as Ptah. Enki, Ptah, talked with his son Ra. But Ra did not listen to his father. The plan in his heart was to become the lord of the four regions, and in front of his father, unyielding and determined, Marduk, Ra, pronounced, "The earth is mine, and I will rule the entire planet." After the transfer of the royalty of Uruk to Ur, the city of Nannar and Ningal, they joyfully smiled upon the people. As was appropriate for his rank of number 30, the moon god Nannar was worshipped, and he decreed 12 festivals per year, one for each lunar month. He dedicated a month to each of the 12 great Anunnaki. And so, it spread throughout the first region, for both the great and small Anunnaki gods. Sanctuaries and temples were built, and so the people could pray directly to their gods. In the first region, civilization spread from Sumer to other neighboring lands. In the cities of men, local rulers were appointed as righteous shepherds. Artisans and farmers, shepherds and weavers exchanged their products throughout the region. Laws of justice were decreed. Trade, marriage, and divorce contracts were honored. In schools, the young studied. The scribes recorded hymns, proverbs, and wisdom. Abundance and happiness were spread across all lands. Disputes and invasions also existed. Meanwhile, Inanna in her celestial ship went from land to land. Near the upper sea, she frolicked with Utu, and also went to her uncle Ishkur's domains. Inanna liked to call Ishkur Dudu beloved, and during her flights, Inanna took pleasure in the people who inhabited the upper plain between the two rivers. She found the sound of their language pleasant, and she learned how to speak it. They gave Inanna the name of Ishtar, and this was the name of the planet Lahamu in their language. It was they who named the city of Uruk, and in the language of that people, Ishkur was called Adad, and Nanar was known as Sin. The city of Urim was called by then as Ur, like we are already calling. Ki-Engi was named as Sumer, land of the lofty watchers. Utu, the bright sun, was named Shamash, and Enlil came to be known as Father Enlil, while Nibru-Ki became Nippur. All this was a stark contrast and a glaring difference. In the second region, Ra did not allow diversity, for he desired to reign alone. Ra proclaimed that he was the oldest of heaven, the firstborn who is on earth from the earliest times. He decreed that hymns should be sung this way, and that he wished to be called and known as such by the priests. Lord of eternity, he who made perpetuity, presiding over all gods, the one who has no equal, the great lone and unique. Ra pronounced, "I am Ra, and I am above all other gods." Then he attributed his powers and attributes to himself. Ra continued, "I am like Enlil for lordships and decrees. I am like Ninurta for the hoe and combat. I am like Adad for thunderbolts and thunder. I am like Nanar to light the night. As Utu, I am Shamash as Nergal. I reign over the lower world. As Gibil, I know the depths of gold from where copper and silver come. It was I who found it. As Ningishzida, I command the numbers and their count. The heavens speak of my glory." At these proclamations, all the Anunnaki leaders were greatly alarmed. Marduk's brothers decided to talk to their father Enki, while Nergal relayed his concerns to Ninurta. Enki, Ptah, went to talk with Marduk, Ra. He asked, "What happened? Your claims are unheard of." Marduk, Ra, said, "Father, it's the heavens speak, and they speak of my supremacy." Marduk continued, "The bull of heaven, the sign of Enlil's constellation, was slain by his own offspring. In the heavens, the age of Ram, the age of Aries, my era is coming. The omens are unmistakable." Then, from his dwelling in Eridu, Enki examined the circle of 12 constellations. On the first day of spring, at the beginning of a year, the sunrise was carefully observed. The sun that rose that day was in the stars of the constellation of the Bull. In Nippur and Ur, Enlil and Nanar also made the observations. In the lower world, where the station of instruments was, Nergal confirmed the results. The age of the rams was distant. That was still the age of the bull. It was Enlil's bull. In his domains, Marduk did not back down from his assertions. He had the support of Nabu, his son. To domains that were not his, he sent emissaries to announce that his time had come. The Anunnaki leaders asked for Ningishzida to teach people how to observe the sky. In his wisdom, Ningishida conceived stone structures. Ninurta and Ishkur helped build them. In the established lands near and far, they taught people how to observe the sky, showing the people that the sun still rose in the constellation of the Bull. In those times, after the Anunnaki declared themselves as gods, they now depended on the support of humanity. Enki watched these events with attention and sadness. He pondered how fate could be being distorted. In the first region, the Anunnaki decided to unify the lands under the name of just one leader, desiring a warrior king. Thus, Inanna was assigned to the task of finding the suitable man for this. Inanna indicated to Enlil a warrior whom she had found and loved during her travels. He was the son of a commander of 4 garrisons, and his father's name was Arbakad. His mother was a high priestess. Enlil offered him scepter and crown. He received the name Sargon I, righteous regent. As in Nibiru, a new crown city was established to unify the lands. That was called Agade, the unified city, and it was not far from Kishi. Agade unified the lands of Sumer and Akkad. Enlil granted powers to King Sargon, and Inanna accompanied her warriors with her weapons. All lands from the lower sea to the upper sea obeyed Sargon's command. Thus all his troops were stationed at the borders of the 4th region to protect it. And Marduk, Ra, constantly observed the movements of Inanna and Sargon. Caution was the word of the moment. And Sargon made a bold move. He went to the place where Marduk tried to build the tower that rose to the heavens and proclaimed that it was a sacred ground for Agade. He mentioned imposing the bright heavenly object there. Marduk raced furiously to the 1st region with Nabu and his followers. He went to the place of the tower and said, "I am the sole possessor of the sacred ground, and by me will a gateway of the gods be established." Marduk was vehement and offered instructions for his followers to divert the river. They raised dikes and walls at the tower place. They built for Marduk a new house. It was called Esagil, the house for the utmost god. Nabu named it Babylon, the gateway of the gods, in honor of his father, in the heart of Eden. Thus, Marduk settled in the midst of the 1st region, in the heart of Eden. With this, the wrath of Inanna knew no bounds. Armed, their followers attacked Marduk's followers. The blood of the people was shed, unlike anything ever seen on earth before. Nergal traveled to Babylon and met his brother Marduk. He asked Marduk to leave Babylon for the good of the people. Nergal invited Marduk to travel to observe the skies, and Marduk agreed to leave. Thus, he traveled from land to land, observing the signs of the heavens. Marduk, known as Ra in the 2nd region, received another name. He was called Amun, the Invisible, because he ruled but was not there. For a time, Inanna calmed down and carefully watched the 2 sons of Sargon, who were his successors. Later, on the throne of Agade, Sargon's grandson, known as Naram Sin, took the throne. Those times were different times. In those times, Enlil and Ninurta were absent from the 1st region. They had gone to the lands beyond the oceans, and in the 2nd region, Ra was also not there because he traveled to other lands. Thus, Inanna saw the opportunity to take all the powers for herself. She ordered Naram Sin to seize all the lands. She instructed the king to attack ancient Egypt and Meluha, Nubia. Those were domains of Marduk, also called Ra and Amun, the Invisible. In those times, Naram-Sin committed the sacrilege of crossing the fourth region with an army of earthlings. He also invaded ancient Egypt and tried to enter the sacred Ekur, the house that is like a mountain. Enlil was enraged by his sacrileges and his transgressions, and then he cast a curse on Naram-Sin and all Agade. Naram-Sin died from a scorpion sting, and by Enlil's command, all of Agade was annihilated. That was the year 1500 by Earth's counting. In the second region, in the domains of Marduk, Ra, known as Amun, the Invisible, the royalty disintegrated. Disorder and confusion found space. After Agade was swept away in the first region, there was also disorder and confusion. In the first region, the royalty was in disorder. Before the gods, the cities gradually came to be governed and conducted by men. Uruk, Lagash, Ur, and Kish, Isin, and other even more distant and far-flung places, the royalty was changing. Enlil sought the guidance of Anu and entrusted the royalty to Nannar. Thus, for the third time, the royalty was established in Ur. To rule, Nannar selected a just shepherd of men. That was Ur-Nammu. Ur-Nammu was a great ruler. He established equality in the lands, ended violence and fighting, and in all the lands, prosperity was abundant. It was in those times that during the night, Enlil had a dream vision. Just as Enki had seen at another time, Enlil also saw. It was the image of a man shining and radiant as the skies. He stood beside Enlil's bed, and when he approached, Enlil observed and recognized Galzu, the white-haired one. In his left hand, he held a lapis lazuli tablet, on which the starry heavens were drawn. The heavens were divided by the signs of the 12 constellations, and Enlil could recognize. Galzu signaled the shift. The sign of the bull was no longer pointed out, and 3 times Galzu pointed to the constellation of the ram. In the dream vision, Galzu spoke to Enlil. The rightful time of benevolence and peace will be followed by wickedness and the shedding of blood. Marduk's ram will replace Enlil's bull in the 3 celestial portions. He who has declared himself the supreme god will take over the supremacy on earth. By decree of fate, a calamity as never before will happen. And as in the times of the flood, a just and worthy man must be chosen. Through him and by him, his seed will be preserved and civilized humanity will survive, as is the will of the Creator of all. When Enlil woke up from the dream vision, there was no tablet next to the bed. Enlil wondered, was it a heavenly oracle, or did I imagine everything in my heart? Enlil asked himself, and kept the information only to himself. He did not tell any of his children, not even his wife, Ninlil. Among the priests in the temple of Nibru-Ki, Enlil asked about the celestial sages. He inquired about Tirhu, also known as Terra, an oracular priest, whom the high priest pointed out. He was a descendant of Ebru and Arbakad, the 6th generation of priests of Nibru-Ki, and had married the royal daughters of the kings of Ur. Enlil said to Terra, "Go to the temple of Nannar in Ur, and from there observe the celestial time in the heavens." 72 Earth years is the count of a celestial portion. Take careful note of the passage of 3 of them. While Enlil pondered his dream vision and its omens, Terra went to the temple of Nannar, and Marduk traveled from land to land. Marduk's goal was to gain followers, telling them about his supremacy. In the lands of the Upper Sea and in the borderlands of Sumer, Nabu, Marduk's son, traveled stirring people to take the 4th region. Among the inhabitants of the West and the East, conflicts occurred. Kings formed armies of warriors and caravans stopped traveling. City walls rose for protection. Enlil watched everything with great care and attention. He realized that what Galzu had predicted was really happening. He realized that he should make his decision. Enlil looked more closely at Terra and his sons. This seemed to him a worthy lineage, and from there should be chosen the man appointed by Galzu. Without revealing his dream vision, Enlil said to his son, Nanar, "Establish a city, inspired by Ur, in the land between the rivers. It will be a home away from Ur, and it will be for you and Ningal. In its midst, you must raise a sanctuary temple, and let Terra be its high priest." In accordance with his father's decree, Nanar established the city of Haran in the lands of Arbakad. To serve as the high priest in its sacred temple, he dispatched Terra along with his family. When 2 heavenly parts out of the prophesied 3 were completed, Terra went to Haran. At that time, Ur-Nammu, the joy of Ur, fell from his chariot and met his mortal fate in the western lands. Upon the throne of Ur, Shulgi took command. He bore a warrior's soul and had a keen appetite for battles. In Nibruki, he anointed himself high priest and sought solace in the body of Inanna in Uruk. He enlisted the mountain warriors, those not serving Nanar, into his army. With his forces, he disregarded the sanctity of the Mission Control Center and invaded the western lands. Setting foot in the 4th region, he declared himself king of the 4 regions. Enlil was angered and summoned Enki for a conversation. Enki spoke. "The rulers of your region have crossed all bounds." Enlil retorted, "Marduk is the root of all troubles." While keeping the vision dream to himself, Enlil turned his attention to Terra. Terra had an elder son. His name was Ibru, also known as Abraham. Abraham was a prince, brave and well-versed in priestly secrets. Enlil ordered Abraham to guard the holy places and allow the celestial chariots' ascent and descent. As soon as Abraham left Haran, Marduk, who had been wandering through each city and region, reached Haran. Marduk, too, had observed the desecrations and invasions by the rulers of Enlil's regions. He noticed that this was the harbinger of a new era and a new order. So, on the border with the lands of Sumer, while in Haran, Marduk planned his final assault. 24 Earth years had passed since Marduk arrived in Haran. And then, by a message of the oracle of the temple, he knew that time has come. With tears in his eyes, Marduk called upon the other gods, all of them. Marduk proclaimed, "O gods of Haran, O great ones who judge, know my secrets. Just as my belt wraps around me, I recall my memories. I am the divine Marduk, a great god. In my domain I am known as Ra. I was exiled due to my sins and was banished to the mountains. I have wandered many lands, from where the sun rises to where it sets. I reached the land of Ishkur. I lived in Haran for 24 years and sought an oracle in its temple. I asked about my lordship. And the oracle of the temple told me, 'Your days of exile have ended. O great gods who determine destinies, let me return to my city. Let me establish myself in my temple Esagil, and from there install a king in Babylon. Let all Anunnaki gods gather in my house and accept my covenant.'" The Anunnaki gods were perturbed and alarmed. Enlil summoned all Anunnaki for a council. All were agitated about the events, and the position of opposition to Marduk and Nabu was unanimous. In the council of the great gods, accusations were abundant, and recriminations filled the chamber. tension seized everyone. Enki spoke up and advised, "No one can prevent what is about to come. Let us accept Marduk's supremacy." But these were only Enki's words. An irritated Enlil opposed, "If the age of the ram is coming, let's prevent it from reaching the heaven-earth bond. Let's annihilate the place of the celestial chariots." All decided to annihilate the place of the celestial chariots except for Enki. Nergal suggested using the weapons of terror, and all the Anunnaki agreed. Only Enki opposed, once again. Thus, the decision taken on Earth was sent to Anu, and Anu repeated the same words to Earth. The decision was made. As he departed, Enki said, "What was destined to be will fail due to your destructive decision." To carry out the evil deed, two were chosen. They were Ninurta of Enlil's clan, and Nergal of Enki's clan. And then the assembly of the gods ended, and so the decision was made. Enki was the only one who opposed, but his heart was at peace. Before Enlil came to Earth, it was he and Abgal who had hidden the weapons of terror. Enki had no idea that Enlil had two secrets: the vision dream of Galzu and the secret location of the weapons of terror. Enki did not know that Abgal had shown Enlil the secret location of the weapons of terror during his exile. Enki could never imagine that their long stay on Earth would provoke a calamity unlike anything known before on this planet. Without any contact with Enki, Enlil revealed to the two Anunnaki, Ninurta and Nergal, the secret location of the weapons of terror. He showed them the mountain where they were hidden and told them that they were inside an earth cavity. Afterwards, he revealed the secret of how to use the weapons of terror appropriately. Before the two Anunnaki left for the hidden place, Enlil gave them words of warning. He said, "Before the weapons of terror are used, evacuate the place of the celestial chariots of all Anunnaki. The cities must be spared, and people must not perish." In his celestial chariot, Nergal headed for the hidden place, but Ninurta was delayed due to his father. Enlil wanted to talk to his son in private, so Enlil told Ninurta about his dream vision and Galzu, and also about his choice regarding Abraham. Enlil told Ninurta, "Nergal may not be in perfect conditions of thinking. Make sure the cities are spared, and warn Abraham about the weapons of terror." Meanwhile, Nergal, who had already arrived at the secret location of the weapons of terror, programmed the ME to utilize the weapons of terror. Nergal gave each of them a working name. The first weapon he called the One Without Rival, the second the Blazing Flame, the third the One Who with Terror Crumbles, the fourth Mountain Melter, the fifth Wind That the Rim of the World Seeks, the sixth the One Who above and below no one spares, and the seventh, filled with monstrous poison, he named Vaporizer of Living Things. After the instructions from his father, Ninurta went to the secret location of the weapons of terror. When he arrived there, Nergal had everything ready to cause destruction and annihilation. Nergal, desiring revenge, said, "I will kill the son and annihilate the father. The lands they covet will fade away, and I will destroy the sinful cities." Ninurta asked, "Nergal, will you destroy the righteous with the unjust?" Nergal replied, "Enlil's instructions are clear, and I know the decision of the Anunnaki too." Then the two waited for Enlil's signal. 7 days and 7 nights they waited. During this time, Marduk returned to Babylon in the presence of all his followers. With weapons in hand, he declared his supremacy. But this was Enlil's intention and the necessary step for the destruction to begin. That was the year 1736 in the count of the Earthlings. On that fateful day, Enlil sent the signal to Ninurta. With the signal, Ninurta left for Mount Mashu and Nergal followed him. Ninurta, from the skies, inspected the mountain and the plain in the heart of the fourth region. With a heavy heart, Ninurta signaled Nergal and warned, "Stay there." And from high in the sky, Ninurta released the first weapon of terror. The top of Mount Mashu cracked and the guts of the mountain melted in an instant. The second weapon was released over the place of the celestial ships, and with the brilliance of 7 suns, the rocks of the plain became an open wound. The earth shook and collapsed, and then the skies darkened. The plain of the celestial ships was covered with burnt and crushed stones. In all the forests that once surrounded the plain, only 3 trunks stood. Ninurta, from high on the celestial ship, from his black bird, affirmed, "It is done." And so, the lands coveted by Marduk and Nabu were forever devastated. Then Nergal said he wanted to be the Annihilator and desired the title of Era through his deed. Following the king's road, he flew to the green valley of the 5 cities. Nergal planned for this to happen in the green valley where Nabu was converting the people. Thus, over the 5 cities, one after the other, Nergal, under the title of Era, sent a weapon of terror from the skies. And so, in a wave of destruction, he completely annihilated the 5 cities of the valley, which quickly turned into desolation. They were razed by fire and sulfur, and everything that lived there turned into vapor. With such terrible weapons, the mountains came down, and the barrier that held the waters of the sea broke. The sea waters spilled into the valley, and the valley was flooded by the waters. When the waters poured over the ashes of the cities, steam rose to the skies. From high on his ship, Nergal shouted, "It is done." And so, in his heart, Nergal, now known as Era, had no more vengeance. He had done what he planned. Inspecting their evil work, Ninurta and Nergal were confused by what they saw. The splendors were followed by the darkening of the skies, and soon after the storm blew. Inside a dark cloud, whirlwinds formed in the sky and an evil wind rose, plunging the sky into twilight. As the day went on, the sun disappeared and darkness took over the horizon. Night came, and with it a dreadful splendor highlighted its edges, causing the moon to disappear, swallowed up in a dense cloud of destruction. When dawn came the next day, coming from the west, from the upper sea, a wind of a dense storm began to blow. And then the dark brown cloud moved east, heading towards the inhabited lands. The dark brown cloud traveled, and wherever it went, it brought the death of everything that was, without any mercy. From the valley of no pity, the cloud of death was carried to the lands of Sumer. Ninurta and Nergal gave the alarm to Enki and Enlil. They announced, "The evil wind is relentless, and it will bring death to all." Enlil and Enki transmitted the alarm to the gods of Sumer with a clear message: "Escape, escape." They shouted to all. The frightened gods fled from their cities and quickly ascended to the heavens. The message to the people was clear: scatter and hide as quickly as possible. The inhabitants of the lands fell under the claws of the evil wind, and their fugue was completely useless. death was silent, and like a ghost, it attacked all fields, all lands, and all cities. The winds of death passed through the thickest walls like the waters of a flood. There was no door that could keep the wind away. Those who hid inside their houses and with the doors closed were swept away, and thus, like flies, they fell to the ground. The streets were piled with bodies, and the mouths of those trying to survive overflowed with saliva and foam, and then the blood came with a premonition of death. Slowly, the evil wind blew over all the lands and crossed from west to east over plains and mountains and annihilated everything that lived. After its passage, nothing was left alive. The waters, once clear, were poisoned, and in the fields all vegetation wilted. From Eridu in the south to Sippar in the north, the evil wind devastated the country. In the second region, all lands south of Babylon were devoured by the evil wind, which also reached the heart of the second region. But ironically, the sacred Babylon, from where Marduk had declared his supremacy, was spared by the evil wind. And from there, where Marduk and his followers had declared command of the whole earth, everything continued as if nothing had happened. After the great calamity, Enki and Enlil met to analyze what had happened. Enki said, "The fact that Babylon survived the great calamity serves as a divine sign. The salvation of Babylon confirms that Marduk was destined for supremacy." Enlil replied, "It must have been the will of the Creator of all." Then Enlil revealed the dream vision and the prophecy of Galzu. Enki questioned, "If you knew about this, why didn't you prevent the use of the weapons of terror?" Enlil said in a distressed voice, "My brother, the reason was clear. After your arrival on Earth, each time the mission was obstructed, we found a way to overcome the obstacle. Thus happened the creation of Earthlings, which was the grand solution, and this was also the source of a myriad of undesirable turns. When you came to understand the celestial cycles and assigned constellations, who could foresee the hands of fate? Who could distinguish between the lots we chose and the fate we could not avoid? Who proclaimed false omens and who could pronounce true prophecies? It was for this reason that I decided to keep to myself Galzu's words. I needed to know, were the words of the emissary of the Creator of all true, or was it my delusion? So I said to myself, what has to happen, let it happen. Enki listened to his brother's words, nodding his head. Enki said, "The first region is desolate, the second region is in chaos, the third region is wounded, the place of the celestial ships no longer exists." That's exactly what happened. Enlil said, "So that was the will of the Creator of all. And if that was the will, then this is what is left of our mission on Earth. This is exactly what was sown through Marduk's ambitions. So let him reap the seed of what he has planted. Let the 50th position, which was to be Ninurta's, be granted to Marduk, and let Marduk declare his supremacy over the desolation in the regions. As for me and Ninurta, we will no longer stand in his way. We will go to the lands beyond the oceans, and for the reason we came here, on a mission to obtain gold for Nibiru, we will continue until the conclusion of our tasks." Enki listened carefully. Then he said, "Perhaps things could have been different if the weapons of terror had not been used." And Enlil replied, "And if we had not heard Galzu's words to not return to Nibiru, what would have happened? And if we had stopped the Earth mission when the Anunnaki organized the first rebellion?" The two pondered. Enki said, "I did what I did, and you did what you did. The past cannot be undone. Isn't there also a lesson in this? Isn't what happened on Earth a reflection of what happened on Nibiru? Is the past an outline for the future? Will humanity, created in our image and likeness, not repeat our successes and failures?" Enlil remained silent, and when he stood up to leave, Enki reached out to him and said, Let us greet each other as brothers and as comrades who have faced many challenges on a foreign planet." Enlil reciprocated, and grabbing his brother's arm, he also embraced him. Enki asked, "Will we meet again on Earth or on Nibiru?" Enlil responded with another question. Was Galzu right? Would we die if we returned to Nibiru? Then Enlil turned and left. Enki was left alone. Only his thoughts accompanied him. Enki sat down and reflected on how everything had started and how everything had unfolded until now. In his heart, many doubts still remained. Was everything destined, or was fate forged by this or that decision? He pondered to himself, if heaven and earth were regulated by cycles within cycles, could it be possible for what happened in the past to happen again? Is the past the key to the future? Are the Earthlings destined to imitate the Anunnaki? Will the Earth relive what Nibiru lived? Should the first to arrive be the last to leave? Assailed by his thoughts and numbed by his doubts, Enki made a decision. He said to himself, "Everything that happened needs to be recorded, from the beginning on Nibiru until this day on Earth, and that in posterity, at the time chosen by destiny, the Earthlings read this record and can remember the past to understand the prophecies of the future. Let the future be the judge of the past." Thus, Enki waited for the appropriate time. And on the 17th day of the second month of the 7th year, after the great calamity, he called for 2 emissaries. He clarified that his chosen one to record the information was a scribe, son of Udbar, a man of Eridu, named Endubsar, the master scribe. He told the emissaries that they should lead his chosen one by a small ship to the lands of Magan, in ancient Egypt, where the gates are, in the middle of the river of Magan. And there, for 40 days and 40 nights, Endubsar, the chosen one, recorded all the information on 14 tablets, and then recorded his own attestation. Thus, Endubsar, one of the survivors who had escaped death during the destruction of Eridu, received from Enki the blessing of the long life. Through the hands of Endubsar, the words of Lord Enki were recorded on the 14 tablets. No word was lost, no word was hidden, and his words traveled through time and space until in the future this story finally found us. So the saga is complete, and the story of the Anunnaki based on Zecharia Sitchin's The Lost Book of Enki is concluded. However, this channel does not find its end, and the mysteries surrounding the Anunnaki narrative remain even more intense. To what extent can we consider this story a fiction, and to what extent does it find the truth? In the tablets that are available for reading on the internet, can the authenticity of such narratives be verified? Continue watching the videos on the channel and look for answers to your questions in the available playlists and videos. Together we will uncover the mysteries that surround the Anunnaki story and topic. Thanks for watching.